Hello and welcome to Retro Reviews, my channel where I review my favorite retro video games of all time as well as some modern releases I have recently finished. Today I have a kind of disappointing video to talk about. I saw this over the weekend and I held off on talking about it until I had some more information and had more thoughts on it and everything. So recently I'm going to be referencing my laptop here in the corner, so if you see me look down, that's why. I'll probably try and post the images that I'm reading on the screen so you can look at it while I'm talking, but if not, that's why I'm looking down. So the Video Game History Foundation has been trying to get a digital archive of sorts for people to let, like, essentially the institutions to lend out old retro video games to people, so for research, for enjoyment, whatever it is, just like any other media that you can find at a library. And the decision has been unfortunately shut down. They have not granted access to this, not giving an exemption for video games for whatever reason, despite having access to things like movies or books digitally. Now, the way that it works for a library is if they're lending out a digital copy, though the reason they only have a limited amount of digital copies is they can only have as many digital versions as they have physical versions. So a library could have 5 copies of a book and get 5 digital copies of said book to loan out. It's a nice system. It makes it so that you still have to wait in line. You don't just have unlimited access so that everyone can download it and play it all at the same time, or like play a book or watch a movie. So it makes it more of like an actual library instead of just a free file sharing system. I've always thought this was an excellent choice for video game preservation. Seems like the best way to experience it. Now, some libraries do have access to old physical copies of video games, but the list is not super expansive. You don't have access everywhere you go. And having like a digital archive online and being able to rent out these classic games, especially the ones that are in danger of being lost to time, would just be so fantastic. But unfortunately, US copyright is blocking that, at least for the next 3 years. They have a chance to appeal in 3 years and try and go through the process again, but right now we're being a little bit let down. It's pretty disappointing, honestly, because I've talked on this channel a ton. My channel's name is Retro Reviews. I love retro video games so much. It's why I started this channel. I love emulating my old video games. I love like being able to make digital copies of my own video games that I've purchased and then play them on the go on my little Retroid. I think that's fantastic. And being able to emulate old games that you don't have anymore is really important. Preserving video game history is really important. And not only that, being able to experience some of these old games that you just would not be able to otherwise is a really important thing for me. Now, downloading emulators online is completely legal. You can do that, but downloading ROMs for those, the games files themselves, is not legal. You have to make your own digital copies. Well, if you had the emulators on your computer or like a Retroid or your Steam Deck or whatever, and you had the access to rent out these files, it would be really fantastic to see. It would give you so many options to play retro video games. Now, apparently the argument here is that the ESA, which is the, excuse me while I look for this, I'm forgetting specifically what this is. They represent publishers for video games. They argue that this could damage the used game market, the retro game market, which I think is an interesting thing to say, since the retro game market is typically just individual sellers selling their things online. Are they worried about people making less money on the retro video games? I don't really know what that's all about. Collectors are going to pick up their pieces. This doesn't damage people wanting to collect old video games. They're not collecting them if they're renting them out from a library digitally. I think this is a weak argument. I think this is just publishers want to hold on to the rights for their things and not give access to anything that they don't have to, so that they can remaster or not remaster anything at will. They want to leave some things behind. They want to have the option to do it in the future, or just let properties die because they don't care about what the consumer wants. They just want to care about the new thing. My biggest reservation here with like trusting these publishers is that just look at the video game landscape nowadays. Video games aren't really created to be super fun anymore. They're meant to be created to be really addictive, to get you to spend money. Typically, they're meant to be not fun to the point where you want to spend money to circumvent the not fun that you're having. So I think it's in video game publishers' best interest to not allow you access to these old retro video games so you can play the new slop that they're putting out. And that's really disappointing. I know that's a very cynical way of looking at it, but that's my experience with the video game industry right now, and I think that's where we're heading. It just looks like a lot of publishers are really jumping on this. How do we monetize the heck out of everything that we make? even like single player experiences. How do we get microtransactions in there? How do we make an online component? How do we make sure that people are not playing old video games and just playing our new stuff? Or we'll give them a remaster every now and again to satiate that, and now go and play the live service game that we're making. It's just really sad to see, honestly. I mean, I have trouble with talking about this. I did a whole video on emulation with Shin0555. If you want to go check that out, it's really fantastic. It's called Text Box. It's episode 2. We talk all about video game emulation. Now, I think that all video games, now the whole proposition here for the US copyright here is that any video game out of print should be readily available digitally to loan out for research purposes, just like movies and other media that you could find at a typical library. I think that's perfectly plausible, because if publishers don't care about that library, if they shut off all access to it, you don't have access to purchase those games anymore, there should be a way to still access them. I think that's completely fair. And to the point that I am 100%, especially with really old video games, really obscure games, I totally understand the idea of ethical piracy, getting these games, because they don't exist anymore if you don't have the files for them. Honestly, like, if someone has the files and they upload them so that more people can experience this random niche game that's never going to come back ever for anything, due to copyrights, due to the publisher not caring about the property anymore, to just being some random strange experiment, I think it's really important to have access to those things. I want to experience those weird games. It's not a far shot, I don't think, for people to claim like ethical piracy here. And I totally understand that argument. I would like to have access to all the old video games that you just don't have access to anymore. I remember the days. I remember way back in the day when like LimeWire was a thing and people were just downloading music. File sharing sites were going crazy. All the ROM sites were just chock full of all these old retro games, again, that are out of print. This isn't like all these brand new games that just come out and people are pirating all these things. They're just downloading a bunch of old games because they want to experience them. They want to experience what these old consoles had to offer for them. They want to experience the great games that they loved when they were a kid or something like that, or just something they'd never seen before. They might have been scrolling through one of these sites and saw like some random Flintstones game for the Game Boy Advance, which I actually have a physical copy for. That's why it came up to my head. I remember getting it at Target on sale for $10, I think. Maybe it was 15 as a little kid. I had no concept of what, I mostly followed my brother's advice, but this one, I'm like, this one looks like it's cheap. I want to get a new game. Here we go. It was the weirdest game I've ever played. That game, I don't even know if you could even like find a solid review for that game, let alone find a file for it. But stuff like that, unique random crap on like that someone published and put out there, it's not going to exist anywhere else. If you have a digital option for it, loaning it out seems really plausible, because there's not going to be like a giant line of people looking to play the Flintstones game, honestly. Like, it's just not going to happen. So just having access to it just seems really nice to me. And I just wish we had more things like this. The fact that they're striking this down is not only like a little bit baffling for me, since they have access to other things in the media space, but it's also just really discouraging for the future, because it just sets a precedent that like they don't care about this. They clearly are siding with the ESA and siding with publishers, saying we're going to protect you, but we're not going to act in the interest of the consumer at all. It's just really tough to see. And honestly, this stuff like this just makes people want to pirate things more, pirate these old games. Again, they're not taking any money away from publishers by doing so. These are old out-of-print games that no one's making money on. The only person making money on it is the random seller of the cartridge or the disc from a million years ago that they happen to have a copy, and they're selling it for $500 on eBay right now. They're the only person benefiting from the inflated used like retro video game market here. The publishers are not being hurt by this. I don't know why they're hell-bent on just blocking us from playing old games. Again, I think my cynical brain is saying because they want you to play all the new slop they're putting out and put as much money as you can into their pockets. I saw like some division head getting a $30 million raise. I think it was someone in Microsoft amid the mass layoffs that they've had in the Xbox division. That kind of crap is awful. That's a result of people putting so much money into all this slop coming out, and them not caring about their own developers or the people playing the video games. Clearly they do not. They just care about lining the pockets of their CEOs and such. And it's just really discouraging. So for me, I just don't have a problem when people want to access these old games. I would love to have more legal channels for that. Honestly, I think that's the best way to do things. But if there's not one of those, blocking this kind of thing just encourages more people to do that. And absolutely people are doing it. People are doing it all the time. Like everybody that downloads, like on the Apple Store recently got emulators. Everybody that downloads those emulators is just going online and finding some ROMs online and playing Pokemon games. That's what they're doing. 150%. I guarantee you probably a high percentage of those people are downloading a Game Boy Advance emulator to play Emerald or Leaf Green, Fire Red, Ruby and Sapphire. Like that's what they're doing. People want to play these old games. They want to have access to them. So I think, from Nintendo's perspective, they should put it on their Nintendo Online service to encourage more people to subscribe to that, or give us access to the 3DS remakes since we don't have a store for them anymore. Stuff like that would be really fantastic. That would give us more options so we don't feel like that's the only option is pirating here. So I just wanted to talk about this rant for a little bit. It is really discouraging. I think more people should be able to access these old games. I love old games. I love playing quirky ones. One I'm playing right now is Little Nemo in Dreamland. This is a game that my brother had. I think he said it was his very first video game he ever had. Got a Nintendo Entertainment System, got that game, and it's one of the weirdest and hardest NES games I've ever touched. It's one of those like that you have to emulate in save state because it's just so absolutely freaking hard. And it's a great game too. These games don't just exist out in the wild very often, and you're not just going to find a cartridge, and you probably don't have the hardware either to back it up. So having a digital option is the best choice here. So that's what I wanted to rant about today. Let me know in the comment section down below what you think. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.